Hey, I'm Yoad. Welcome to my studio. Today we're going to learn how to mix a live drum kit. So first we're going to set up the kit, then we're going to clean it up, gate it, use some triggers in order to help us gating it in a more precise way. After that, we're going to add some samples to the kick and snare in order to enhance them and give us more flexibility when mixing. And then we're going to mix and show how we can use this one recording in different styles of music. Let's begin. So I have all the tracks here. I'm going to set the faders to -9 dB, so that will give me some headroom. Let's listen to what we have. So this could be turned into a rock track, a pop track, a metal track. At the moment it's raw, so we can pretty much take it in any direction that we desire. I'm going to lower the overheads. I'm going to lower the hi-hat and pan it. I always mix from the drummer's perspective, so the hi-hat is on the left, the toms go like that. Now the ride is super loud. We just need a tiny bit of it and we're going to pan it to the right. So at the moment, the toms mics are giving us a lot of sound we don't need. So we don't need all that, we just need them to be active when they're playing. So the first thing I'm going to do is to clean them up. I can do it manually because there aren't too many tom hits. So I can go to each one and just clean them up like that. If I'm lucky and there's enough dynamic difference between the tom hits and the rest of the kit, which would usually be the kick and the snare, I can use strip silence and then find the threshold which will be sensitive enough to get that tom hit. Now, I don't want to separate it to two different hits. I just want it to go up to the next one. So usually it will be like an 8th note or something like that. And then I can see if I can apply it to the rest of the track. Then I'm going to fade the ends. So once we've done that, they should look something like that. And even if it sounds a bit chopped, together with the rest of the kit, it will sound fine. Because we have the masking from mainly the overheads. And now we can really listen to how the kit sounds. And we can play with the level of the overheads. Now, if you noticed, there's no room mics recorded in this session. Later in this video, I will show you how to recreate room mics from a recording which didn't capture those. The first thing I'm going to do is insert an SSL 4000 channel, because there isn't anything I know that sounds better on a live drum kit. So that will always be my go-to. I've mixed many thousands of songs on SSL desks, and it just sounds right, whether you're working on a pop track or a rock track or whatever. The first thing I'm going to do is to gate the kick, and I'm just using the SSL gate for that. And here I'm just reducing 10 dB when it's closed. The other way is to use an expander, which will make the whole thing more smooth. And then I can increase the range. So I can work with both these controls to get to a point where the snare bleed is still there, but it's just quieter. And this will become more prominent when we use the compressor because of the makeup gain. Now I can use the fast attack on the compressor. This will make all the hits sound more even, but it can take away from the weight of the kick drum. I think that for a song like that, I would use the faster tap because I want control. And now, what I would usually do is find kind of a boxy, cardboard-like frequency and get rid of it. And that opens up the entire kick drum, and now I can add lows. I also want to cut anything below 30 or 40 because we don't need that. The SSL high-pass filter is quite gentle. And then I'm going to look for the punch. Now here, when I introduce more high mid and highs, because I will need that as well. At the moment it sounds quite peaky, but in context we will need that. Now I'm hearing more of the snare bleed. So we're going to look for ways of getting rid of that, which will still sound natural. At the moment, let's live with that, and let's move on to the snare. I'm going to go for the presence. There's something magical about the 8K, which is the default high frequency position. Just sounds so good. And here I have two options. If I want to make it less kind of tinny, then I can find something to cut. But if I want it to be more ballsy, then I will find the frequency near the fundamental where the hit actually happens and boost that. And now let's hear it in context. And now I'm going to move to the overheads. And here, again, I have two options. One is to use the faster tap. And let's listen to the crashes. So everything sounds very smooth. And here I'm going to brighten it up a little bit. I want to make sure that the ride is not too loud. And maybe I can even look for somewhere around 5 or 6 where I can tame the ride a bit. So this is very processed. This is more like what I would do in a pop song, where you don't really use the overheads that much, and you just want to hear the crashes. So I'm basically taming the kick and snare hits by using fast attack. The other approach will be to use the slow attack and less compression. And that will give us a more kind of rocky approach, because we're sounding more natural. The hi-hat is not getting compressed by the kick and the snare, so there's no pumping. One thing I can do is to switch it to mic. And now I'm going to distort the overheads. And that will give me a more raw sound with a lot of energy. And I may want that. And there's something about distorting the crashes that sounds really good. And I can make it a little bit less boxy. this is almost like the pop control, because here it's very poppy and clean, and here it's more raw. If I wanted to boost the mid-range, I would use probably somewhere around here. And what I can also do is have the EQ before the dynamics, before the compressor, and switch to fast attack. So I don't need a lot of compression. Yes, I like that. Again, depending on what song we're working on, but I can change the whole vibe of the kit just by changing the sound of the overheads. They're so important. So let's go for something more neutral. Now let's look at the snare bottom track. It's really important because it gives us clean, high frequencies without too much spill. The first thing I'm going to do is to check the phase, because the position of the two microphones are out of phase. So when recording, we have to always make sure that we flip the phase on the bottom snare mic. And this hasn't been done here. We can see that they're out of phase. So the first thing I need to do is to flip the phase. So these are just the two snare mics. Let's bring it up a bit so we can hear it more. So here it sounds thin because we're actually cancelling out the fundamental frequency. And that sounds much more full and natural. So that's a good starting point. And then I can try to brighten it up. And this is really important because I'm not bringing up the hi-hat when I'm doing that. And I can find this papery frequency and bring it down. And then I can gradually bring it up until it sounds good. Now the snare is a bit loud and the kick is quiet. And now we need to treat the tones. So let's go for the same thing. I'm just going to solo the first tone and then add some highs and some lows. So I'm going to open it up and maybe use the compression to just show it who's the boss. And then I'm going to just copy this to the other tom tracks and let's listen to them together. Now I can look at the individual tracks. Maybe let's loop around this fill. Maybe here I can cut some mid, and maybe I can cut some mid here, and maybe I can add some lows. And now we can pan them. That sounds pretty good. And let's hear it in context. Quite loud. That's okay. Nice. So this is the basic setup. From here, I can take it in many different directions. Now let's go more surgical. So if I want to use the gate in a more predictable and precise way, I'm going to look for the transients. Now the transients are not related directly to the gain. They are more related to the difference or the steepness of the level between 2 points. I can easily find the transients. So let's make sure that we have all the hits and that we don't have any hits we don't need. So you can see it doesn't take very long. And now I can go and convert this to MIDI. This is super, super useful. So not all DAWs can do that. I use it all the time. I think it's worth buying an old Mac that runs Logic just for this purpose. If you're mixing a lot of live drums, because it works better than any triggering plugin, because this is offline. I can go and set each hit and I know exactly what it's doing, and there's nothing unpredictable about that. Now I have the triggers and I have the original dynamics reflected here. And from here I can go to a multi-sample snare drum. So each hit will be a different sample. And together with the original snare, that can sound as seamless as we want it to. So this is a good way of augmenting the sound of the live drums, but I'm going to use this for another purpose, and that is for gating the snare drum itself. So I'm going to create a new instrument track. I'm just going to create a pulse. And I don't want it to respond to velocity. So I know that each MIDI note is exactly the same. I'm going to take it out of the mix bus, so we're not going to hear it. At the same time, I'm going to solo save it. So when I hit solo on any other track, it will not get muted. And now I can go to the snare drum. I'm going to put a dedicated gate after the SSL channel, and that's a gate which can receive sidechain. And this will open the gate. And then I'm going to give it some release. Something like that. Let's hear it in context. So that's super clean. It's not going anywhere. It's always going to do the same thing. It's totally predictable and reliable. And that's why I like this method. So I have this MIDI track and it's there. Now, if I feel like I'm losing the front of the snare, which I'm not in this case, but what I can do is I can give it negative delay. So now it will open before. I just need to find the point where it sounds natural. So now I know that I'm not losing anything from the front of the snare hit. And then I can play with the gain reduction. So I don't have to go all the way, unless it's like a really super tight, I don't know, pop or disco track. But if I just go 10 dB or 15 dB, that's it. So that's super tight. And now we can add the snare sample. Now what I like about this sample is that it has the overheads and the room mics in it. Let's say we want even just the room. And I can do the same with the kick. So let's repeat that process. With the kick, it's usually a lot easier. And then I'm going to assign it to the same Easy Drummer track. And here I'm just listening to the ambience. So now I have room samples. And I can use the SSL channel with fast attack to really compress them. Give them some mid. And I have the room mics. And obviously I can do the same with the toms, just get them triggered. Now let's look at another way of extracting the room sound from the overhead mics. And for that, I'm going to take my kick and snare triggers and I'm going to send them to a bus. I don't want to hear this bus in the mix, so it's just kind of an internal routing thing. And then I'm going to insert a gate, which I'm going to use for ducking. I'm going to use the same gate, and now I'm going to choose the kick and the snare pulses group. And let's listen to that. Now it's set to gate, but if I set it to ducker, now I want it really fast. And now I'm going to bring the range up. So I'm getting a similar sound to where I would be compressing the hell out of the room mics. And on top of that, I'm going to use a transient designer or shaper and give it the sustain while reducing the attacks even more. Maybe I don't need as much ducking. And then let's mute the samples and listen to the overheads as room mics. So I'm getting that sensation. It sounds very kind of compressed and pumping, but that's okay. Maybe I want that. And the gate serving as a ducker has a lot to do with that, because I can also give it longer release. And I just need a tiny bit of that. Something like that. Now let's talk about effects. We use the triggers to create room mic samples. And I want to use that sound in order to send it to the effect. And for that, I'm going to use an impulse response I recorded from the AMS RMX16. Now let's listen to it in context. And listen to the difference, because if I send the actual snare into the reverb, the reverb is kind of somewhat disconnected from the snare sound. But if I send the sample, it gels a lot better. And I can do the same with the kick. If I want to get that 80s sound. And now I can use the RMX ambience program, which is a little bit more gentle. And I can turn it into a gated snare sound. And we can give it some mid, which will give it some attitude. Maybe make it a little bit longer. Quite loud, but it's in the right direction. Let's say we wanted to use some more pop samples and we wanted to make it more 80s. So here I can ignore the dynamics and here I can get the vibe of the AMS DMX which was used heavily in the 80s to trigger snare sounds. And it didn't have any velocity sensitivity, so it's kind of as is. So I can trigger any sound. That sounds quite 80s. And let's do the same for the kick. So suddenly we have some more 80s tracks. I mean, this is not necessarily the right kind of part for that, but still. Anyway, there's lots we can do to this drum recording, but I think that this video has been long enough. So I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you know what to do, and I will see you on the next one.